1,
Number 2.
Number 3.
4.
5.
6.
7, 8.
Wouldn't it be nice if you had some extra cash? I mean, think of all the things you could buy. More clothes, more food, maybe even a tropical trip to Hawaii. Obviously, this is merely a hypothetical situation, but because many of us struggle to make ends meet on a day-to-day basis. However, let's consider the very opposite alternative. What if you had less cash and you were struggling to make ends meet with less money than you have now? Imagine attempting to maintain your living standards or provide for an education. The first situation, obviously, is not going to happen unless you win the lottery. However, the second situation is very likely due to a situation you are very familiar with, federal deficit. Now, why would the federal deficit take away from all your money, and how could it happen? Well, first, in order to understand this, you need to understand how the federal deficit works. The federal government, in order to finance its programs, everything from defense to Medicare, it has to borrow money to make up for lack of revenue. However, the government has to pay back its money, obviously, and in order to do that, it must end its borrowing. However, in its current state, if we end our borrowing, we'll be unable to pay our lenders, which results in a default. Now, in this graph published by the Federal Reserve Bank of St. Louis, you will notice the blue line are the taxes and revenues that the U.S. government has been collecting since 1940, while the red line is government spending. And as you can see, starting in 2000, the two have widely diverged, and we have trillions of dollars in debt where the revenue does not match the spending. In an article published by London newspaper The Telegraph on July 25, 2001, Stephen Lewis, financial advisor for Monument Securities, said that if the U.S. failed to meet its obligations, the global financial system collapses. You get political and economic meltdown. It would be the end of the world as we know it. In the same article, journalists Emma Rowley and Philip Aldrich write, almost without exception, for the average person, it would mean a massive destruction of wealth and a severe reduction in living standards. So, obviously, we can't let that happen, so we need to fix the deficit. Now, how do we go about doing this? Well, some, like Warren Buffett, CEO of Berkshire Hathaway, wrote in an article in the New York Times called Stop Coddling the Super Rich, published on August 14, 2011, that if we tax the wealthy, we would easily solve our problem. And this has been supported by many others. Now, at first, this seems like a great idea. You know, the middle class gets to keep all its money and gets to rely on the wealth of the fat cats. However, unknown to many, we have tried this and it's failed. In fact, we're trying it right now. The Tax Foundation was quoted in an article Paying for It, published by The Economist on July 17, 2012. The top 5% earned 31.7% of the nation's adjusted gross income, but paid approximately 58.7% of federal income taxes. Now, what's this look like? Well, this is the entire American population who make money. This small blue sliver are the top 5% of Americans. While the rest, the 95%, are the middle class and the lower class. However, look who actually pays the taxes. The blue, the 5%, are paying over 58.7% of all our taxes, which is quite an outstanding endeavor, while combined, the lower class and middle class just pay this small amount right here. Also, research has proven that taxing the wealthy hurts the middle class. Princeton researcher Harvey Rawson, in his article, Income Taxes and Entrepreneurs' Use of Labor, published by the Journal of Labor Economics in April of 2000, wrote that when you tax the top 5%, they start laying off workers and are unable to afford to provide jobs. And this has a devastating effect on the economy. However, when you lower taxes, you get more jobs provided and they start hiring more workers, which increases the amount of money in the economy. So think about that. That means that the answer to solving the deficit would be lowering taxes by growing the GDP. Journalist Steve Denning, in his article, Fix the Deficit, Grow the Real Economy, Stupid, published by Forbes on February 22nd, 2011, wrote that in the early 90s, the deficit seemed impossible to fix. However, by 2000, it was zero due to outstanding GDP growth. All that needed to be done was grow the GDP, and the deficit was fixed. How? How does the GDP fix the deficit? Well, lowering taxes grows the GDP because there's more spending money left to the lower and middle class. In the 2010 article, The Macroeconomic Effects of Tax Changes, Estimates Based on a New Measure of Fiscal Shock, published by the American Economic Review, David and Christine Romer, former advisors to President Obama, wrote this: tax increases appear to have a very large, sustained, and highly significant negative impact on output. They continued to write, an exogenous tax increase of 1% of GDP lowers real GDP by almost 3%. That is outstanding. If you lower taxes, the GDP grows, and the influx of money brings in more revenue. Now, don't take my word on that. Take the word of Michael C. Carnusio, a very famous free markets analyst. He wrote in an article, Free Market Friday, Echoes of Others, published on July 19, 2012 in the Journal Record about the current deficit problem that the state of Oklahoma has. And he wrote that there was a tax cut called the Henry Meacham tax cut. And it was argued that if we decrease taxes, then the government would be unable to bring in any more revenue. However, he wrote this: yet, despite all the negative predications by state economists, including the Oklahoma Tax Commission's estimate that the last Henry Meacham tax cut would decrease state personal income tax collections by $60 million, state personal income tax collections actually increased by $296 million, and sales tax collections increased by $192 million. So we cut taxes, and we actually brought in more revenue. That is an incredible feat. So rather than losing money due to a financial collapse, this plan would result in the strengthening of bank accounts due to more spending money and less taxes. Think about this. Rather than taxing the rich and shrinking the economy, we should cut taxes for all and grow the GDP. And it is imperative that we do this, lest the deficit take immediate effect. Because not only is your own welfare at stake, the future lives of your children are also endangered by this crisis, and we must act now before it's too late.